I did not hear them leave. That is the thing I return to, even now. Years later, when the word dignity has settled into my vocabulary and worn grooves there like water over stone, I return to that first silence, and I think, I did not hear them leave. I heard the last of the gunfire, the percussion of the withdrawal charges they set at the ridgeline, and then I heard nothing. No voice calling my designation. No retrieval ping on my comm. Just the forest of Drethanur breathing around me, the low, wet hiss of the canopy exhaling fog, the creak of the prefab wall behind my shoulder, and the blood ticking steadily from the wound in my leg onto the dark soil. In Korath warrior culture, there is a word for what I was at that moment. The word is Velsora. It means, roughly translated, the one already counted, as in, counted among the dead, as in, the arithmetic has been done, the ledger closed, the margin noted. The Korath High Command did not abandon me on the moon Dreth Anur in the 43rd hour of the 3rd Anur offensive. They made a calculation. I was a single warrior with a shattered fibular strut in my left leg and no means of independent extraction, and the cost of sending a retrieval craft back through contested airspace exceeded the value of the asset. I understand the calculation. I have made calculations like it myself. I tell you this not to excuse them. I tell you this because I want you to understand what I believed in that moment. Lying against the outer wall of the forward outpost on the western tree line, listening to the forest breathe around me, I believed the calculation was correct. I believed I would die on Drethanur, probably before sunrise, and I believed this was a reasonable outcome given the available data. I did not account for Soren Dask. He was there when I surfaced from the blood loss haze. I don't know how long I'd been unconscious, but the light through the canopy had shifted from the gray-green of midday to the amber-gray of late afternoon, so some hours at least. He was sitting against the wall 6 feet to my left, knees up, carbine across his lap, watching the tree line. He was not watching me. He was simply there, the way a stone is there, without apparent agenda or anxiety, doing the job of being present with the same unhurried competence he seemed to bring to everything. He was human. I registered that immediately. The blunt features, the dark hair plastered to his forehead under a dirty field cap, the 2 eyes placed forward in the face for binocular depth perception, the bilateral symmetry that always strikes Korath eyes as slightly uncanny. He was wearing the dull brown and gray fatigues of the Terran Expeditionary Ground Forces, with the single braid stripe of a corporal on his left sleeve, and a name stenciled over his chest pocket, Dask. The fatigues were torn at the right shoulder, and there was a field dressing there, self-applied, dried brown at the edges. He had been injured too then, probably in the same firefight. I did not speak. Speaking would have required energy, and I was rationing what I had. I watched him instead, the way I would watch a new obstacle, cataloging it, looking for what it intended to do. He didn't intend to do anything immediately. He sat, he watched the tree line, and after a while, he reached into a pouch on his chest rig and took out a sealed ration pack. He held it for a moment, apparently reading the label in the fading light, then put it back. He took out a different one, held that one, read it, kept it. Then he looked over at me. "You're awake," he said. Not a question. A simple statement of observed fact, delivered without surprise or excitement, as though he'd been expecting it. I said nothing. "Your leg's bad," he said. I packed the wound, best I could with what I had. The bones cracked or broken, I can't tell which without imaging. "You're going to need to stay still." His voice was level and unhurried. He spoke to me the way someone might speak to a colleague in a briefing room, not gently, not roughly, simply directly, as though the information was what mattered and my reception of it was my own business. I said, "Why are you still here?" He considered this. "Because you were still here," he said. "And because I'm not going anywhere without comms, in the dark, through a contested tree line, on a moon I've been on for 4 days. That's bad math. Your unit withdrew." "Yes." "Hours ago." "Yes." He opened the ration pack, some kind of dense, dark bar, which he broke in half. He held one half toward me without looking over, setting it on the ground equidistant between us. You need calories. Your body's compensating for blood loss. I looked at the ration bar on the ground. In Korath warrior culture, accepting food from a stranger of lower designation, which this human certainly was, by any measure of our hierarchy carried implications I did not have the clarity of mind to fully process. I was also acutely, unceremoniously hungry. My body, indifferent to custom, won the argument. I took the bar. I ate it. He ate his half. Neither of us spoke for a while. The fog thickened as the light went. The tree line became a wall of dark shapes. And then the dark shapes became sounds. The creak and drip of the canopy. Something that moved at the edge of audible range, and then stopped. Dask's attention sharpened when it stopped. His hand moved to the grip of his carbine, not lifting it, just resting there. The sound resolved into nothing. Some animal, or the wind, or both. His hand eased. The Anur offensive has failed, I said. It wasn't a question. He would know this if he'd been listening to his comms before they went silent. Looks that way, he said. Your command will send extraction eventually. For surviving ground elements. Eventually, he agreed. Probably 2-3 days, once they've established the new line. Then you are waiting here for 2 or 3 days. Or until comms come back up and I can get a fix on my unit's position. Whichever comes first. I looked at the dark beyond the prefab wall. I thought about the 2 or 3 days as a unit of time, measured against my leg and my blood supply, and the resources Soren Dask had in his field kit. I had done the calculation before, while I was conscious enough to do it. The numbers were not comfortable. You do not need to remain here, I said. If you move now, before full dark, you have perhaps 2 hours of usable light. The contested area runs 3 kilometers to the eastern ridge. You could reach it. Could, he said. Your wound is shoulder, mine is leg. You are mobile. I am not. I know. A pause. Then you understand what I am telling you, I said. I understand what you're suggesting, he said. I'm not doing it. I studied his profile in the last of the available light. He was looking at the tree line, not at me. His jaw was set in a way I would come to recognize a kind of patient, non-negotiable certainty that had nothing bellicose about it. He wasn't defying me. He wasn't proving anything. He was simply indicating, without drama, that a particular course of action was not going to happen. I am a Korath second-tier warrior, I said. My command has made its calculation regarding my survival. You are a Terran corporal, with no orders pertaining to my welfare, no authority to allocate field resources to a foreign combatant, and no strategic reason to remain at this position. The rational decision. I'm not interested in the rational decision, he said. Not right now. Then what are you interested in? He turned to look at me then, the first time he had looked at me directly since I'd woken. His eyes were a dark shade that looked brown in the low light. Deep set, slightly shadowed, steady, not kind, exactly or not only kind. Competent, settled. The eyes of someone who had thought things through and arrived at a conclusion and was not revisiting it. Keeping you alive until morning, he said. Then we'll see what morning looks like. I did not have an answer to that. In Korath warrior culture, we have very precise language for every variant of military obligation, hierarchical duty, species bond debt, and strategic alliance. We do not have particularly precise language for a stranger from a species you barely know deciding, with no evident motive, that your continued existence is worth his time and resources. I stored the data point. I slept. He was still there when I woke. He had moved, but only to set up a small covered position against the outer wall, a length of salvage composite braced at an angle to shed rain, which had started sometime in the night. The soft, steady percussion of it on the canopy above. He was inside the improvised shelter now, legs out, still watching, still awake, or close enough to it. His carbine was across his knees, and there was a faint chemical smell that I recognized as a field antiseptic. He'd redressed his shoulder wound at some point, one-handed, which spoke to a particular combination of patience and stubbornness. He looked over when I moved. "Morning," he said. "How long have you been awake?" I asked. "Couple of hours." He pulled his field kit closer. "I'm going to look at your leg. Tell me if anything I do causes the pain to spike. I want to know if I'm making it worse." This was a practical request, not a solicitous one. I appreciated the distinction. Among Korath warriors, being asked to monitor and report your own pain is treated as a matter of operational accuracy, not emotional support. He had landed on the same register by instinct or experience, I did not know which yet. His examination of my leg was thorough and efficient. He had clearly had training beyond a basic combat first aid course. His hands moved with the specific economy of someone who understood anatomy and was problem-solving, not performing. He asked me questions as he worked. Where was the original point of impact? Had I felt the fracture give or simply collapse? Was there numbness, or was the sensation intact? I answered them. His hands worked. "The break isn't fully displaced," he said finally. "That's the good part. The bad part is, you need it immobilized properly, and you need fluid replacement that I can't fully provide. I have 2 IV lines in my kit. I can get a slow drip saline going, which will help the blood pressure situation. The bone, you're going to need real medical attention for the bone, which is unavailable. Which is unavailable right now," he corrected. The distinction again present. Unavailability versus total absence. I filed it. He set up the IV line with the same one-handed efficiency. The saline was room temperature, which felt strange entering the vein. But stranger than that was the experience of watching someone perform this careful task and having no context for the motivation behind it. "What is your name?" I asked. "Dask. Soren Dask. Korath used the family name first. Vale is my personal name. Korath is my caste line. Which should I use?" I considered. Among Korath, personal names are for those of equal or greater rank. Family names are for all others. Soren Dask was not Korath, had no rank within our system, and the entire Korath hierarchical convention felt, at this particular moment, somewhat beside the point. "Vale," I said. He nodded, as though this settled something small but real. "Vale," he said, trying the sound. He got it nearly correct. The initial consonant was a Terran approximation, but close enough. "I'm Soren." "Soren," I said. We said nothing for a while after that. The rain came down on the canopy. The IV bag dripped. I watched him watch the tree line, and I thought about what I was looking at. In Korath warrior hierarchy, a second-tier warrior is roughly equivalent to what Terrans would call a non-commissioned officer of middle grade. It is not a high rank, but it is a real one earned through performance evaluations, campaign records, combat citations. I had 7 campaign citations. I had led patrols on 4 contested systems. I had been commended twice by first-tier command for tactical decisions under fire. None of this had prevented the calculation. None of it had made me worth the fuel cost of a retrieval run. And Soren Dask, a Terran corporal, the second lowest commissioned grade in his military structure, a man with 1 braid stripe and a torn shoulder and a field kit, and absolutely no obligation to anyone named Vale Korath, was here. I did not understand it. I had been trained to be suspicious of things I did not understand. Motives that are opaque are usually dangerous. I ran the scenarios. He wanted leverage over me for later negotiation. He was following orders I was not aware of. He was engaging in some Terran cultural ritual involving wounded combatants that I had not been briefed on. He was, for reasons of psychology I could not assess, unable to leave injured beings behind regardless of consequence. Over the next 12 hours, I examined each scenario and discarded it. He asked for nothing. He received no orders. His calm was as dark as mine after a certain point, and I watched him listen to the silence of it with the same even expression he brought to everything else. He showed no sign of performing a ritual. He was not deliberate or ceremonial in any of his actions, only practical. And the psychology scenario, the inability to leave scenario, I sat with that one longer because I could not quite discard it the way I had the others. But inability suggests compulsion, something done despite better judgment, and that was not what I was seeing. I was seeing choice. Repeated, clear-eyed, undramatic choice. He was not here because he could not leave. He was here because he had decided to be here, and he had not, in the 12 hours since I had pointed out that he could leave, changed his decision. By the second night I was running a low fever. He had anticipated it, he told me so, in a matter-of-fact way that had no smugness in it, just the practical transfer of information. Infection risk was always there with a field pack job, he said. I've got a broad-spectrum course in the kit. It's Terran, so I don't know exactly how your body will process it, but it's better than nothing. You tell me if anything feels wrong. The antibiotic did not kill me, which I considered a relevant data point regarding his judgment. I slept through most of the fever, and he was still there when I surfaced from it, crouched beside me this time, checking my temperature with a small device he pressed to the side of my jaw, which he had apparently been doing at intervals while I was unconscious. He noted the reading, made a small sound of cautious approval, and sat back. Better, he said. Not good yet. But better. How long was I? About 9 hours. 9 hours. I processed this. And you have been here. Yes. You have not slept. I slept a little. Hour, maybe 2. He shrugged the shoulder that wasn't injured. I've done longer. I believed him. He had the specific quality of someone familiar with the geography of exhaustion. Someone who had mapped its terrain before, and knew which paths through it were navigable and which were not. He was not fighting the tiredness or performing around it. He was simply working within it, as he worked within everything else, with economy, without complaint, attending to what was in front of him. I had watched him, during the hours I was closest to the surface of the fever, without breaking through it, in the strange transparency that high body temperature gives to consciousness. I had watched him move around the small perimeter of the outpost wall, with the methodical attention of someone maintaining a position, checking the tree line, listening at intervals, returning. I had watched him eat half a ration in the dark, and then put the other half back, apparently deciding I would need it when I woke. I had watched him sit beside me, and press 2 fingers to the inside of my wrist, very lightly, checking the pulse the way he had checked it before a brief professional check, not a prolonged gesture. He made the check and moved on. He did not linger. It was the not lingering that I noted. Among Korath, caregiving to an injured warrior carries a specific social weight. The caregiver establishes something, a relationship of asymmetry, a degree of debt created, and this weight is present in the way the care is given. It shapes the touch, makes it deliberate, makes it legible as a transaction. Soren Dask's care had no such weight. His checks were checks. His adjustments were adjustments. When he pressed the thermometer to my jaw, it was because he needed the data, and when he got it, he noted it and moved on. There was something in this, in the complete absence of performance, that I turned over carefully in the heat of the fever. It was either the most transactional thing I had ever encountered or the most genuinely selfless, and I could not determine which, and I fell back under before I resolved it. I looked at him in the gray-green light of Drethanur's morning, filtered through fog and canopy. He looked tired. The shadows under his eyes had deepened, and there was a tremor of fatigue in his left hand that he controlled with apparent practice. He still looked competent. He still looked settled. He did not look like someone who was waiting to be thanked. Soren, I said. He looked at me. Why? I said. Not as a challenge. Not as the suspicious interrogation of the previous day. I said it simply. The way one asks about something one genuinely does not understand and wishes to. Why are you still here? He was quiet for a moment. The way he was quiet before speaking was different from the way he was quiet the rest of the time. There was something happening behind the steadiness, something being considered and sorted and selected from. When I was 17, he said, I was in a transit accident. Old rail system on my home station. Car derailed. I don't know, 30 seconds from something very bad. And the only reason that very bad thing didn't happen was that a woman I'd never met grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the door and held on until the emergency crews arrived. She didn't know me. She had no reason. She just decided. He paused. I've thought about her a lot over the years, he said. I've never been able to figure out what made her do it. But I've always known, in a way I can't really explain, that the answer matters more than almost anything else I could think about. What makes someone decide that? What that decision is made of? He looked at the tree line again. I don't have a complete answer. But I think part of it is just you see somebody, and you know you can do something about it, and you do it. Not because there's a reason, because there isn't a reason not to. I lay with that for a while. In Korath warrior culture, we are not trained to make decisions on the basis of things that have no tactical justification. We are trained to make decisions on the basis of hierarchy, mission parameters, resource availability, and projected outcome. A Korath second-tier warrior does not remain with an injured stranger of no rank or affiliation because the sight of the injured stranger requires a response. That is not a sentence the Korath hierarchy would recognize as a directive. It struck me. Lying there on the floor of the ruined forward outpost on the moon Drethanur, that Soren Dask had a completely different operating system. Not a worse one. Not a weaker one. Just a different one. One in which the sight of a person in difficulty was itself sufficient instruction. I did not know what to do with this, but I filed it with unusual care, in the part of my memory where I store things that seem like they will matter later. The third day was quieter. The fever continued to retreat. He changed the dressing on my leg, kept the IV drip running when we still had saline for it, and ate the last 2 of his own rations without dividing them. I had told him to stop dividing them, that I was able to manage on less than he was because of differences in metabolic rate, and after I explained the physiology, he had accepted this and stopped arguing. He argued when he thought I was wrong. He stopped arguing when I demonstrated I was right. This also went into my files. We talked more on the third day, partly because there was less that needed immediate managing, and partly because conversation had become not a requirement, exactly, but a natural thing. A thing the silence kept making room for. He told me about his home station, Meridian Platform, a mid-belt orbital, 30,000 people, an economy built on material processing and transit brokerage. His parents had both worked in the processing sector. He had 2 sisters, one older, one younger. The older one had a daughter now, which made him an uncle at 34. A fact he mentioned with a dry, sideways humor that was the first real humor I had seen from him. Does she know you are here? I asked. My sister? Yes. She knows I'm on deployment. She doesn't know the specifics. A pause. That's probably better. She would worry. She would tell me I'm an idiot. Then she'd worry. He picked at a piece of composite flooring near his boot. She's right on the first part most of the time. I told him about Korath, the caste system, the 7 warrior tiers, the way children are assessed at early adolescence, and assigned to training tracks that determine not just their career, but most of their social world for the rest of their lives. The way second tier is considered a respectable but unremarkable outcome. Neither the prestige tracks of first tier command, nor the tactical specialization of the third and fourth. A useful rank. Not a celebrated one. I had been assessed at 14. The assessment was 3 days long and covered physical performance, strategic reasoning, pain tolerance, and what Korath evaluators called Vel-Reth. Roughly, the capacity for loyalty under pressure. I had scored well in 3 of the 4 categories and adequately in the 4th. Strategic reasoning was my strongest measure. The evaluators had noted it twice in the written summary. I had been proud of that. I had carried the summary in my service record for 16 years. It had not prevented the calculation. I did not say all of this to Soren. I said enough. The structure of the assessment, the way the results shaped everything that followed, the relationship between the tier you were assigned and the tier you would likely remain. He listened without interrupting. He had a quality of listening that was different from the Korath model. He was not cataloging, not evaluating, not positioning for a response. He was simply receiving what I was saying, the way clear water receives light. What would have happened, he said carefully, if they'd sent a retrieval run? I thought about this. I would have been returned to the medical unit. My leg would have been repaired. I would have been assessed for fitness to return to active duty. If assessed as fit, I would have returned to my unit. And if not fit, then I would have been discharged at the current tier and processed out of the warrior hierarchy. What does that look like? You become civilian caste, I said. It is. I paused. In Korath culture, there is a word for the feeling of that transition that does not translate cleanly. It is not shame, exactly. It is more like the specific grief of becoming a different kind of thing than you were trained to be. It is an adjustment, I said finally. He heard what I had not said. I watched him hear it, a small shift in his expression. Not pity. Nothing so patronizing as that. Just acknowledgement. The acknowledgement that there was something in the gap between what I'd said and what I'd meant, and he had registered it. For what it's worth, he said, I don't think your command made the right call. It was a defensible calculation. I know. I'm saying I don't think it was right. He looked at me steadily. There's a difference. I had been in the Korath warrior hierarchy for 16 years. In 16 years, no one had sat beside me on a ruined floor and said that the calculation regarding my life had been defensible and still wrong. I did not know what to do with the information emotionally, but my body did something with it without consulting me. Something released in the muscles of my shoulders that I had not known was held there. Some long-standing tension that had apparently been waiting for someone to say that particular sentence. I stored it. I did not have words for it yet, but I stored it the way you store an unfamiliar weight carefully, in a place you can return to. I looked at the canopy above us. Drethanur's sky behind the fog was a pale lavender gray that I had come to associate, over 3 days, with late morning. There was birdsong from somewhere deep in the tree line, or what passed for birdsong, a low repeating 3-note call from something that was not a bird, but filled the same ecological role. I used to wonder, I said, and then stopped. What? I used to wonder what I was fighting for, I said. Not in the way that implies doubt about the hierarchy or the mission. I accepted those. I was good at my work. But there are, in long campaigns, there are hours when the question arrives without invitation. What is the thing that matters here? What is the reason the calculation should come out in your favor rather than against you? I moved my hand on the ground beside me, a small, restless motion. I never found an answer that satisfied. The hierarchy is real, and I served it. But it is not a reason, exactly. It is a structure. He waited. I continued. Lying here, watching you not leave, I think the answer might be something like what you described. Seeing someone, and deciding that matters. That the decision can be made without a reason, because there isn't a reason not to. I had not meant to say that much. It came out anyway, with the particular looseness of things said in the 3rd day of a fever's retreat, when the body's careful management of what the mind is allowed to express has been somewhat eroded. He did not make it strange. He did not amplify it or editorialize or treat it as a moment of significance to be marked. He simply received it, with the same steady competence he brought to dressing wounds and monitoring fevers, and nodded once. Yeah, he said. Something like that. On the 4th morning, his comm crackled. We both heard it, the first noise from either of our communication systems in more than 2 days. He was on his feet in a single motion that was faster than it had any right to be from a sitting position, the carbine in his hands, before his boot soles had properly settled. And then he registered. It was a calm crackle, Not a contact. And his hands steadied. He brought the comm up. Listened. His expression did not change during the listening, which meant it was not good news. Or not entirely. When he lowered it, he stood for a moment with his eyes on the tree line. Your unit? I asked. My unit is at the eastern ridge. He paused. They've been there since day 2. I calculated. They did not return for you. They didn't know exactly where I was, he said. A beat. They also didn't prioritize finding out. I looked at him. He was still looking at the tree line, his jaw in the set I knew now, the patient, non-negotiable set, that processed something and arrived at a conclusion. After a moment, he sat back down against the wall. Not in defeat. Just back down. What did they say? I asked. Extraction point is at the ridgeline, running through the night. They want anyone in the contested zone to make their way there in the next 8 hours. He laid the carbine across his knees. 8 hours to the ridge, through those trees, with your leg, is not possible, I said. Not for both of us. A silence. Then you go, I said. The calculus is the same as day 1. My leg does not allow independent movement. You are mobile. You go to the ridge and you board the extraction. He looked at me. I will have comms now that the band is open, I said. I can transmit my position to Korath recovery units, if any are operating in this sector. The situation is different from day 1. Is it? He said quietly. I held his gaze. His eyes were very steady and very direct, and I had learned, over 4 days, that when they looked like that, it meant he was waiting for me to hear something I had not yet heard. I heard it. Soren, I'm not leaving you here, he said. Not defensively, not dramatically, with the same simple certainty with which he had said it on the first night. We'll figure the rest out. The extraction window is 8 hours. Then we have 8 hours to figure it out. He stood up and moved to the edge of the prefab wall, scanning the tree line with a methodical patience that I recognized as the beginning of a plan taking shape. He was looking at angles and distances and ground cover. I could see him doing it, the way his gaze paused and paused again. If I rig something to support your leg, and you use the wall on this side for the first 100 meters, and we rest every 50 after that, he said, half to himself. The math does not work, I said. The math is close. Close isn't the same as impossible. I watched him do the math that didn't work. I watched him do it with complete seriousness, without catastrophizing, without performing optimism, just working the problem the way he had worked every problem in the last 4 days. The angle of the shelter composite, the density of the undergrowth, the number of rest breaks available in 8 hours if we moved at a reduced pace. He pulled a length of salvage strapping from the ruins and examined it, testing its tensile quality between his hands. I need you to tell me honestly about the pain threshold, he said. If I build an improvised crutch, and you can bear some weight, even a fraction, the math changes. I can bear some weight, I said. I need you to tell me at what point it becomes dangerous rather than painful. Because painful we can work with. Dangerous we can't. This was a real question, asked for real information. I thought about it seriously, assessing the current state of the break, the degree of displacement Soren had estimated, the stability of the fibular strut under load conditions. Bearing my full weight on the leg risks further displacement, I said. Bearing a fraction of it, with external stabilization, is painful but unlikely to worsen the injury significantly. The risk is balance. If the leg buckles under stress, the landing will be worse than the original break. So we need to make sure the leg doesn't buckle, he said, which means the crutch needs to be load-bearing and the pace needs to be controlled. He was already pulling pieces from the ruins, testing weights. Can you stand? With support. Then let's find out what we can build. What we built was not elegant. It was a length of structural composite, roughly the right height, lashed with salvage strapping to a crosspiece improvised from a section of prefab wall bracket. It looked like the output of people working with limited materials under time pressure, which is what it was. He tested it against his own weight first, leaning on it at the angle I would need. checking for flex and stability. It held. He helped me stand. This was the moment I had been dreading. Not because of the pain I had measured the pain and understood it, but because of the dependency. Korath warriors learn the topology of their own pride early and in detail. I knew exactly where mine was. Standing required his shoulder under my arm, his weight steadying mine, his body doing some of the work that my leg could not. I put my arm around his shoulder. He put his arm around my back, not under it, not gripping at me, just at my side, a solid presence. He waited until I had my weight distributed and the crutch was positioned, and my breathing had done what breathing does after the first impact of pain. And then he said, quietly, "Ready? Ready?" I said. We moved. It was not a rapid movement. It was not a movement that anyone watching from outside would describe as efficient. It was slow and careful, and it cost both of us my leg and his shoulder, and the compounding tiredness of 4 days of inadequate sleep and field kit nutrition. We rested when I needed to rest, and he called the rests without embarrassment, as though they were simply a planned feature of the route, rather than concessions to limit. He kept the time on his chrono and reported it with the same even practicality as everything else. 5 minutes ahead of pace, he said, at the third rest. We're okay. You are recalculating constantly, I said. The math keeps changing. Have to keep updating it. A slight pause. The math is still close. You said close is not impossible. It's not. We kept moving. The tree line was denser than it had looked from the outpost, and the ground was uneven in ways that required attention, roots, depressions, wet patches where the canopy had channeled the rain into pooled streams. He navigated it with the attentiveness of someone who had spent time in difficult terrain and understood that the ground was not neutral. He chose the better line every time, without announcing that he was choosing it, just steering us slightly left or right as needed. There was a sound at one point, deep in the trees to our left, something large, moving parallel to us, staying at a constant distance. Soren heard it the same moment I did. He didn't stop, didn't signal alarm, simply shifted his hold on the crutch arm, and angled his body very slightly between me and the direction of the sound. Not theatrical, not announcing itself, just a small repositioning that placed him between me and the unknown thing. The sound moved away eventually, receding into the deeper forest. He returned to the previous angle without comment. I thought, I have fought beside Korath warriors for 16 years, and I do not know whether any of them would have done that as quietly or as naturally as Soren Dask just did. I did not say this. I stored it. At one point my crutch found a depression, and the leg buckled, and he caught me fast, with both arms, before I had time to register what was happening. He took my weight for a full 4 seconds while I recovered, without comment, without question, without any of the fuss that Korath instinct expected when weakness was visible. Good? He said. Good, I said. We kept moving. The ridge appeared through the trees with 40 minutes remaining in the extraction window. I know this because he told me, his voice carrying a controlled note of something that was not quite relief, but was the precursor to it. The clearing at the base of the ridge had 4 other figures in it, 3 human in Terran ground force fatigues, and 1 Korath in the light armor of a logistics officer, who registered my approach and came forward. He was second-tier logistics, his designation marked on his chest plate. He looked at me, the damaged leg, the improvised crutch, the IV site at my inner elbow, the general condition of someone who had spent 4 days in a contested forest, and then he looked at Soren Dask, and then back at me. Warrior Vale Korath, he said. We received your signal. We were not certain you had survived. I survived, I said. His eyes moved again to Soren. A Terran corporal held the outpost position, I said. He provided medical support and moved me through the tree line. His extraction window closes with ours. The logistics officer looked at Soren for a long moment. I watched him process what he was looking at: the torn shoulder dressing, the carbine, the general appearance of someone who had used themselves up over 4 days, doing something that had not been required of them. Corporal, the logistics officer said, in accented Terran standard. Soren met his eyes. Your unit is at this extraction point, the logistics officer said. Advance element. They arrived 20 minutes ago. Something moved through Soren's expression at that, not anger. Nothing so clean as that. Something quieter. I watched him look at the 3 other human figures at the clearing's edge, one of whom was looking back with an expression that had some discomfort in it. A sergeant, by the marking. He held Soren's gaze for 2 seconds, and then looked away, toward the ridgeline, at something that appeared to require his full attention. Understood, Soren said. That was all. The logistics officer had been watching this small exchange. He turned back to Soren, and something in his posture had shifted some recalibration. Quiet and internal, but visible to me because I had spent 4 days watching a human face and learning to read the adjustments. The logistics officer straightened very slightly. He brought his right fist to his chest plate, the Korath acknowledgement for those of equivalent standing. Corporal Dask, he said. The use of the full address, rank, and name was not casual. Among Korath, you name the person. You do not shorthand them. Soren received this without apparent surprise or emphasis. He nodded once. The logistics officer signaled toward the ridge. The extraction craft will depart in 35 minutes. Medical assessment on board. Warrior Korath will be prioritized. We moved to the clearing. Soren helped me settle against a section of fallen timber, adjusting my leg with the same careful efficiency, making sure the crutch was within reach. He stayed on one knee a moment after, making some small final check the IV site, the positioning of the leg, and then he sat back and looked at me. You made it, he said. We made it, I said. He accepted this correction with a slight movement of his head that might, in different light, have been something approaching a smile. The first I had seen from him in 4 days. It was a small smile, self-contained, not performing anything, just the natural expression of someone whose math had worked out. I looked at him, the tired eyes, the dirty field cap, the torn shoulder, the single braid stripe on his sleeve, and I thought about everything I had filed over 4 days. The ration bar sat equidistant between us. The question asked for real information rather than reassurance. The steady eyes in the dim light, saying, I'm not leaving you here. The arm at my back, not under me, just present. The recalculating that went on continuously, the math that was close and not impossible. Soren, I said. He looked at me. I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that it is not a matter of Korath courtesy or obligation. I kept my voice level. Because in Korath culture the things said levelly are the ones that mean the most. Among my people, what you have done over these 4 days has no name. There is no Korath word for it. We have words for duty and hierarchy and debt and alliance and obligation. We do not have a word for what you chose. He was very still. I am going to remember it, I said. Every day. For the rest of my life. I am going to remember what it looks like when someone decides that the calculation doesn't have to go the way the calculation goes. I am going to use it. When I am in a position to make the same decision for someone else, I will make it because of you. He held my gaze for a long moment. His eyes were very clear, and very tired, and very steady. That's enough, he said quietly. That's more than enough. The extraction craft came in through the fog with a sound like the clearing itself exhaling. Its lights were amber and white, and they washed the forest floor in alternating warm and cold as it settled. People moved the logistics officer, the other Terran soldiers, the crew coming down the ramp. Soren stood, tucked the crutch under my arm, and helped me up one last time. We walked to the ramp together. His arm was at my side, not carrying me, not holding me up, just present. The way it had been since the beginning, available if needed, not anticipating need. At the base of the ramp, I stopped. Come find me, I said. When this is over. When the line is settled and the paperwork is processed and you have leave. Come find me. He looked at me. There was a question in it. I want to know what the math looks like when there is no emergency, I said. I want to see what you decide when no one needs deciding for. And there it was, the full version of the smile I had glimpsed. Brief, genuine, without performance. He looked, for one moment, like a person who had been seen, which is a different thing from a person who has done the seeing, and which requires a different kind of stillness to receive. "I'll find you," he said. I went up the ramp. At the top I turned, and he was still there at the bottom, watching not sadly, not longingly, just with the same attentive steadiness that had been there since I opened my eyes on the floor of the ruined outpost, and found him sitting 6 feet to my left, doing the job of being present. The ramp closed. I have thought, in the years since, about what it means to be seen by someone who has no reason to look. The Korath hierarchy trained me to earn recognition, to cite citations, to demonstrate performance, to justify my continued existence through measurable contribution. For 16 years, I believed that was what recognition was. You earned it. It was transactional, which did not make it any less real. What Soren Dask did was different. He looked at me on the floor of a ruined outpost on a moon at the end of a failed offensive, with my leg broken and my command's assessment already made, and the forest dark and the fog coming in, and he decided I was worth the cost of his staying. Not because I had earned it, not because I could repay it, not because any hierarchy required it, or any calculation supported it, just because there wasn't a reason not to. He found me 11 weeks later, in a rehabilitation facility on Korath Station 7, where my leg was 3 weeks into recovery and I was learning, with varying degrees of success, to be patient with a body that needed time. He came through the door of the common room, with his shoulder healed, and his field uniform exchanged for something closer to civilian, and a look on his face that I can only describe as the look of someone doing math that has come out favorably, and is not quite sure yet if the result is real. I saw him in the doorway, and something in my chest did something that I still do not have a Korath word for. I have been looking for the word since. I have not found it. I think, perhaps, it does not need one.